Galyn, hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited to dig into your story and what you've been building over the last many, many years. We always love to start these episodes by getting you to give us a bit of an elevator pitch. What is your brand and what is the ethos behind it?
Sure. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Primary is a baby and kids clothing company that I started with a partner about 7 years ago, really because we were frustrated shopping for our own kids' clothing. And so we decided to launch a brand that would solve those frustrations. Namely, we wanted a brand that stood for color in a way that we couldn't find in the market and where color was for every kid. I have twin girls who never liked pink growing up. And I couldn't believe one year when I had to buy them orange jackets in the sort of quote unquote boys section. It just seemed very outdated that I could only find girls' jackets available in pink, white, and teal. And so we wanted a brand where every color was for every kid, where we weren't being prescriptive about who could wear what. And so that was really important. And then the other important piece was sort of simplicity and letting the kids shine. And so in addition to offering a huge range of beautiful colors, we also focus on simple classic designs versus logos and slogans and all sorts of sort of trendy details, and really are able to offer that quality at an amazing price point for busy parents. And so that's what we set out to do. And that's what Primary is all about today.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. I know that you guys started building this around 2015. And at the time, you and Christina, your co-founder, were working together. And I can see that you've gone through that experience where you're frustrated. But what was the kind of moment where you were like, hey, we should actually do this? Like, what are the considerations you're going through? What's that phase like of going from, hey, I'm dreaming about this and it's a, pain point frustration to being like, I'm going to quit my job and start this business?
Yeah. Well, it helped a lot to have a partner, to be honest. I think it was, an idea that we had been thinking about and working on and pulling sort of ideas for about maybe 6 months before we actually made the decision to go try it. And so it was first and foremost like the idea that we couldn't stop thinking about. And it was like we kept being excited and we kept being inspired and sort of dreaming about like being able to actually go do this. But we also were working at Amazon. We had great jobs, like a lot of security. And so it was scary for sure to think about like, okay, we're going to leave this behind and we're going to go try this thing that like, who knows what's going to happen. And so I think that having a partner, like we actually quit on the same day, to sort of do this idea together. And I think that helped a lot. It was almost like we were sort of holding each other's hands through that part of it. And then I think the other thing that just gave us a lot of comfort and confidence was that we knew that in a worst case scenario, we would go try this thing that we were so passionate about. And even if it didn't work, we would have had sort of pride and success and learned a ton by trying. And we could have gone back and gotten other jobs after that. And so it just felt like a nice two-way door in that, where we didn't feel like we were really losing anything in like the worst case scenario. And then in a best case scenario, like think of how amazing this would be to sort of build a brand that we've been dreaming of for that long. And so that just sort of gave us the conviction to like close our eyes a little bit and just go for it. It was a little Thelma and Louise, but not so dramatic.
There's two like schools of camp though when you're kind of quitting your job to build a business, because there's the one side that's like, which is I typically fall into, which is like stay in your job, use your salary to invest in this business, prove out the concept on the side. And when you've kind of like gotten comfortable, go all in. But you've obviously just been like, nope, we're going to go all in. We're going to start this from the beginning. So I'd love to understand that early kind of money piece of like, how much did you need to invest to get started and get the business kind of to launch? And how were you financing the brand in the beginning?
So we did sort of make the decision to go all in on it. And we did know that with that came a need to raise early capital. So we ended up working for like 4 months based on savings that we had without earning a salary. So that was like putting the business plan together and going out and raising a seed round of financing. And then once we raised that seed round, which we had planned to do a friends and family round, and we were looking to raise about $750,000, which would have sort of paid for our salaries and a small team to sort of get the business up and running, like that first order of inventory. And we ended up raising a bit more than that, but that's when we started paying ourselves. And so I think that helped. Like we just knew that we needed to raise that round in order to pay ourselves a salary. And if that hadn't happened, I think we would have been facing obviously a tricky proposition of like, do we keep going and try to bootstrap this or not? Like this was our try. I think luckily we didn't face that challenge at that point because we were able to successfully raise that seed round, but it definitely would have been tricky, I think, at that point to figure out what we're going to do.
Okay, you raised 2.5 in capital. You've got the runway. You've got like obviously a lot of confidence. So many people are excited about what you're doing. What happens next? How do you actually start finding the manufacturers, getting the designs, all these things to get you to a point where you've got like an order and you're ready to launch?
It really was like a moment for us where we just had to keep reminding ourselves like one foot in front of the other one, because I think if we stepped back and thought about like the overall task of just what you outlined, like even now, like 7 years in, it like gives me anxiety to just think about like how enormous that was for us too, where we had like never made clothing before. We had, worked at a startup and we had done e-commerce and we had worked in brand management, but we had never actually like ourselves physically figured out how to go make clothing and launch a website. It was just one of those, like, we are going to talk to as many people as we can, and we're going to follow the breadcrumbs. And we're going to, when we talk to this person, we're going to see if that person can introduce us to a couple other people. And so it was just like, we were relentless in trying to figure out how to get to someone who could help us make clothing that was of the sort of quality and design that we were looking for. It was really just that. And so we ended up with a few partners who had kind of done this before, but without really an internal team who was sort of an expert in this area. It's the thing that I would do the most differently, I think, looking back, is think about like the things that Christina and I were good at, were in our wheelhouse, we were sort of set up to do well, and just make sure that we rounded out the team even really early on with a complement who had like designed and manufactured clothing before. I think in hindsight, that business specifically is so much about relationships. It's so complex, and we would have benefited, I think, a ton from having someone who was like, I've done this before, like, let me just handle this. But we learned a lot trying to do it ourselves.
I bet you learned a lot. I'm reading Phil Knight's Shoe Dog at the moment, and I'm just like, I just don't know if I could do that. It just sounds so like, and I know what you're saying. It's really, something I've said to myself a lot recently is just like focus on my current problems of like tomorrow, what I need to solve, and not like future me problems that creep in. And then you think, oh, well, I've got all these scattered thoughts about all these different things, but actually I don't need to be thinking about that until 6 months' time when that other thing happens, And it's really an exercise in being able to train your brain to be like, have clear focus on tomorrow, follow that one breadcrumb to the next thing and the next thing and next thing, and see where you land.
Yes, totally. And sometimes it's helpful for me to physically like just look down at my feet and like, what is there that I like need to focus on today? And then with that too, I think having a like document or like wherever you keep notes, a notebook or something of like all the things you're stressed about for later, it helps me to just like get them out of my brain onto a piece of paper somewhere so that I know it's there. I've like addressed it. It's like there when I'm ready, but I don't have to like have mental energy around it in the sort of short term.
That is such a great practical tip. It's like, yeah, write down your future stresses that we'll have to cross that bridge one day, and that's a side project that you need to add in, but it's over there and you just don't need to think. It can leave your brain. Like you said, yeah. I love that. I'm totally going to start doing that because I've got too many things floating around in my head.
Totally. It's super normal. But yeah, just like the exercise of like getting them down and like, yep, I see it, it's there is helpful.
Absolutely. Something I love to focus on in every episode is trying to understand that like blueprint around launching a business. So I'd love to kind of go into the launch, what you were doing in the lead up to launch. You've obviously got product that's arrived, you're ready to sell. What is that time like, and how are you drumming up interest towards launch?
Sort of made a conscious decision that out of the gate, we were going to give it a few months just of sort of organic not spending paid marketing dollars, just to sort of make sure everything was working and that we knew what we were doing before we were investing money in sort of acquiring customers and getting more word out about the brand. And so we did that. We sent, we sort of put up social media pages, and we had sign up for the wait list to get notified about our launch that's coming up. We told everyone we knew, like friends and family, investors, just sort of spread the word. We also did sort of a referral program among our early investors where it was sort of a little contest where they each got a personalized code and they could refer friends. And then whoever had the most would claim victory or something. It was like not monetary or anything, just sort of like for the glory of it. Exactly. And that helped too. I think that early endorsement from people and investors who obviously were super passionate about the business and the brand, but also had a big incentive to see this launch go well, was great for us and helped to sort of amplify the message a little bit early on. So that was really it. And then we, once we sort of knew that the website was working, and that was, getting to the actual launch is always a lot. So making sure that the product images were all loaded and that the site was working and we could figure out how the warehouse was going to pick and pack and ship products out, all those things that you sort of flip from oh my God, are we going to actually have product in the warehouse in time? We went up to see it and look at the actual physical product. It was all there. And we're oh, okay, now it's really time. We have to make sure that this website is real and working, and we're going to go, always so exciting and so much energy around that moment. And so, the launch date, we just had our 7th birthday. So I can't believe how long ago it has been. It still feels like yesterday sometimes.
So you launched in 2015.
We did.
Right. And so what are those early months of kind of organic growth? What does that look like for you? What was the impact? Was it, loads of orders pouring through the door, or was it really that kind of step-by-step stacking things on top of each other?
Well, it was interesting. We had an amazing first month, I think in large part because of sort of we had been talking to our friends and families and investors, et cetera, about this launch that was coming. So there was some pent-up demand related to that. So the first month was bigger than we had forecast. And then because of that, we started selling through inventory that we had purchased and didn't have a reorder coming. I think that was another thing, was figuring out the lead times on reorders. And we thought it was going to be 8 weeks and it was 16 weeks. And so bigger month than we thought out of the gate. And then the next couple months were smaller because we didn't have anything to sell. And then we got our reorder in and we were okay, I think we're ready to start spending money in marketing. And that was when, I think it was early days of Facebook. And that was actually a channel we didn't even use at our previous company. So that's dating us a little bit, but it was brand new for us. But I think the best part of early Facebook advertising for us was really just the opportunity to get direct feedback from people who were seeing the ads and were commenting on them right there. It helped us sharpen our message a little bit. As an example, when we went live with the product, I think Christina and I both feel strongly about just sort of presenting our proposition and not alienating anyone and just sort of putting it out there in a nice way. So our first headline was brilliant basics all under $25, which is true for sure. But it's not super breakthrough in terms of this is going to get someone's attention as they're scrolling through their Facebook feed. But the imagery was beautiful. And it was our solid colors of baby suits and the full rainbow and bright colors that didn't really exist in the baby category for sure, or much really in the kids category at that point. And super simple. So we didn't want to do logos and slogans, and we didn't say that because we didn't want to alienate anyone who happened to like logos and slogans. But those early ads, customers were people who saw these ads were playing that back to us and saying oh, finally, no stupid princesses, and oh my God, no stupid slogans on these, gorgeous, simple onesies. And we're yes, that's really what we wanted to say, but we were sort of too scared to say it. And so just putting out visuals to people and hearing what they say back in reaction to it gave us more confidence to start saying what we really meant, without worrying if someone over there who happens to really love a logo, like maybe this brand isn't for them, and that's okay too. And so I think we've gotten better at listening to consumers and taking away like it's okay and it's better to just be very honest about who you are and what you're offering versus like trying to sort of hide it or be really careful about what you're saying.
And also, I think what's really important, and this is something I think about a lot actually, is casual language that actually is what it is and how your customers would say it. Like you were hearing people say these things, turning it into your marketing message. It's like the same on a landing page. You shouldn't like try and make some fancy abstract like thing. It should be very clear. This is what it does, A to B. Like here's the kind of like casual language based on what your consumers even tell you that it is. And I think that's something that often gets overlooked. But good marketing and good copy really is reflective of what consumers are saying about your brand. I love that.
Yes, totally. Yeah, it's something we talk about a lot, really, and sort of just around like how important authenticity is for us, for sure, but really for any brand starting out, where it's so much more fun, and I think it's so much more compelling for customers when you're like really putting your true self out there.
Mm-hmm. And you understand that pain point, and you set you like
Yeah,
if
exactly.
you're saying no stupid slogans, and then people are like, oh yeah, like I hate slogans on baby wear, like there's just such a direct relation there.
Yes, exactly. And then on the, sort of more casual voice, we do talk all the time about, we have an e-commerce site that's like our main method of selling. We just launched a partnership with Bye Bye Baby, but otherwise sell everything through our site. And where we want customers to feel like when they read our product descriptions or any of our copy, it's like the most helpful salesperson in the store is just telling you some things that you need to know, like without being too salesy or without being aggressive, but just helpful. And so we strive for that all the time. We don't necessarily always get it right, but that's what we're always trying to do.
Very clever. I love that. Okay, so you go through this time, you've kind of started to dabble in the performance marketing side of things. If you have to sum up those major milestones in those kind of years that have leapt you forward or gotten you, even if it's not actually something that's leapt you forward, but it's been a big milestone in the journey over the years, what would you kind of put those down if you had to put dot points on?
I think the first two things that come to mind are marketing moments when we sort of had the confidence to launch our first ad with a little bit more of a point of view. And it said, not all baby suits need to say little slugger. And that for us was like true and honest and authentic, but like a little, like still a little scary. But the feedback to that like shift in messaging was like, we were like, oh, we're really onto something. People really care about this and have been looking for it too. And we think this is a brand that like definitely has some potential.
It's about like finding your tribe of people who believe the same things as you and like not being for everyone, because there are the people who love that vibe and they should find the brands that speak to them. And you kind of like almost by being more controversial, you separate like who is your customer to who is not your customer. And I think that's really important.
Yes, completely. And I related to that. We got advice from lots of amazing people along the way, but Mark Laurie in particular, who founded Diapers, always said that brands are built at the extreme. And so for us, that was true, I think, in terms of like extreme simplicity and extreme color breadth. Extreme curation really on our site early on helped us. I think just remember that like this is we're playing a long game here. It's a long journey. It doesn't mean like we're starting at this like very extreme. It doesn't mean we always have to stay there. But just making sure that people are very clear on what you're all about, I think is huge, especially in this space where it's easy to get lost. And, there are a lot of brands that are trying to be everything to everyone. And that wasn't what we were wanting. That's not what we were trying to do.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Okay, so back to the milestones, back to the major kind of moments. We start with that one.
Yes. So that was one. Then there was one where we started getting NPS survey feedback. NPS survey was something that we knew a lot about from Diapers, but it took us a minute sort of when we launched to get it up and running. And, the first few months, our NPS score was like high 80s, hit 90 a couple times. And the customer feedback that came with those NPS scores. So it wasn't just the score itself, which for us was like, we're so proud of it. It felt like we are delivering the kind of service that we always wanted to.
We should just interject for anyone who doesn't know what for NPS, it's Net Promoter Score. And obviously the higher the better. I think they say like something over 70% is like amazing. But it's basically people kind of come back and like rate your site anonymously.
And it's based on one question, which is on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to refer primary or wherever you had just shopped to a friend? That as sort of like the basis for like how you're doing, because it takes into account so many things. So it's just one data point, but it was one that we always cared a lot about. It wasn't just the score, but it was really like the thoughtful feedback that customers were giving us when they were responding with suggestions and things like that. And that to me just was always like, we would read customer feedback at assemblies and like everyone would be crying because of how heartfelt some of these comments were from customers who were so thrilled we didn't have a boys and girls section. And, their daughter who didn't like, in quotes, girly clothes could find clothes that she felt great in. Things like that were huge moments that just like kept us going when things got tough. And then there was a moment, I think, when we hit like our millionth dollar of revenue that was like, this is like kind of feels more real all of a sudden at that level of scale. So that felt like a big one too.
That's so interesting that you say, that was such a big moment hitting the $1 million, because absolutely it's such a big moment. I can't remember the stat off the top of my head right now, but it's something ridiculous that like barely any female founders will ever hit that like $1 million revenue mark. It's really, really low, but I'm not going to try and remember it because I bet I'll get it wrong. But what's also so interesting is I read an article about you from like 2019 that you'd done like 50 million in sales just for that 1 year. So I'm curious to know how you go from 1 million in sales to, must be ridiculous by now, but 50 million in sales.
Deep sigh.
A lot of work.
A lot of work. An amazing team and amazing customers who I think just like have been so supportive of us along the way, and marketing dollars for sure. I think that we, have raised like a good bit of additional capital, a lot of which has gone to investment oriented acquisition marketing. So spending on social channels at pretty significant levels to drive acquisition, knowing that like once a customer sort of came in and shopped primary, they would have a lifetime value, which we could sort of calculate based on their repeat purchases, that would pay for that upfront initial investment, which, I think is, to be honest, like not for everyone. And I think it takes like a lot of conviction and honestly a lot of capital when you're also paying for inventory to invest ahead of time, because you're making these investments in customer acquisition and then you're seeing that investment pay back over, the next year or so. And so it does take some capital. Those early orders were not break even. And so it meant that we had to raise more investment, which was fine. And we have amazing investors that have been very supportive. But I think that there are a lot of brands too that start out, sort of bootstrapping and not going the investment marketing route and seeing if they can just start to pay themselves back on those initial orders, which is just a different way of going. I think because we had experience investment marketing from diapers.com, we sort of knew what that looked like. And we had conviction that we would see repeat behavior play out in a way that made that feel like high confidence investment. And it's part of the reason why we were able to scale relatively quickly out of the gate.
Got it. Very cool. And when you say investment marketing, it's also like performance marketing. That's what you mean, right?
It is performance marketing. Yeah, I think it's sort of anything, because even like, we send catalogs out, and that can be investment marketing too. Sort of not maybe classic performance marketing as people think about, like more digital, but where we are paying, money upfront to send these catalogs out the door to prospects or people who haven't shopped primary before, hoping that like, even if we spend more on that catalog than we'll get in terms of like initial orders upfront, that those will pay back over time.
Got it. And for the channels at the moment in more recent times, what are the channels that are performing well for you at the moment? And what are the channels that are not performing well at the moment?
Yeah, I think, sort of with iOS changes of late, everyone sort of is facing new challenges on the marketing front. I think we still feel good about how channels that we've been using sort of since the beginning, like Facebook and Instagram, and are performing, it's required the team to sort of relook at like our approach and just make sure that our cost of acquisition is still coming in a reasonable place. So I think still working, but definitely like taking some time to sort of figure out how to fine tune. Google search has been a successful channel for us for sure. And then we do send catalogs out to new customers as well as some direct mail. And that's been a channel that we've used since our diapers.com days and continues to work well. I think it's also nice to have more real estate to tell your sort of brand story and offer more of a glimpse into your full assortment, which is harder to do, obviously, in sort of digital channels that are a little smaller format.
Totally. And I guess it makes a lot of sense when, if you're on, if you look at your consumer behavior and you're scrolling on Instagram, it's easy to just like scroll, keep scrolling past. But if something arrives in your letterbox and the hook is there immediately, you have more time, or you might put it down and come back to it. And it's kind of like a much longer time to enjoy that content.
Yes, exactly. And even as a consumer myself, I enjoy getting catalogs that resonate with me. I mean, a huge stack of mail, but I always flip through to like pull out the thing that's the most interesting. So hopefully that is primary for people.
I agree. I love being sold something. I'm like, great marketing. I appreciate good marketing. I'm a marketer's dream. I want people to solve my problems. I want to talk about something that I read you introduced at the start of the pandemic, the 4-day work week. What was driving that decision? How is it going? What's the vibe?
It's so great. I like the word life-changing has come up about it from our team, and I feel that myself. So I would say how it's going is life-changing. We're about 2 years in on it now, and it's hard for me to imagine going back. And when we started, it was actually like a concept that had come up before the pandemic. We had heard about it on another podcast and talked about it as a leadership team just a little bit. Like, would we ever consider something like this? It's really interesting. And we thought about it and thought, oh, that could be compelling, but didn't take any action. And then COVID hit, and we were about a month in working from home, and everyone was just exhausted. Like with every other company, I think you could see it, you could feel it. Like Monday mornings would roll around and everyone was feeling even more tired than they were at the end of the prior week, because the weekend was about like waiting in line at the grocery store and trying to figure out childcare and things like that. Well, I think we all like just needed a break. And it was sort of like everyone in their own way was like, I just need a minute to like catch up with myself, catch up on my stuff, think about work problems without just being on like back-to-back calls all the time. Now from my desk without like getting up and walking around or going outside all day. And so we started with like, everyone's just going to get 2 Fridays off in April. That was sort of like the start of the 4-day work week. And after that, I think everyone just felt so grateful for that extra time. We didn't miss a beat in terms of like performance, or, we weren't getting behind on our work. And so we thought, this is maybe something we should continue doing. And so that turned into Fridays off in May. And then that turned into, let's try this for the rest of the summer. And then at the end of the summer, we said, let's try this for the end of the year. This was still 2020. And so you could tell like, it wasn't something that we were ever like, we are going to do this forever and all time. And I think that helped us have the confidence to just keep doing it, because we knew that in a case where something wasn't working, business performance was suffering, or there was some other reason we needed to go back to the 5-day work week, it was always set up again as a 2-way door. And so we were transparent with the team on that. Like, as long as this is working, we trust the team, as long as everyone's getting their stuff done, like this is what we're going to continue to do. And so at the end of 2020, though, we sort of said, you know what, this is working so well. We're so proud of the team. Everyone clearly appreciates it so much, including ourselves. So let's continue this indefinitely. We did, I think, and we haven't really looked back. The team appreciates it again so much. Doesn't mean that people aren't working on Fridays, for sure. But I think just that flexibility and knowing that you don't have to be working makes the biggest difference in the world for people who can choose to use that time however it's best for them that week.
100%. I am so on board with the 4-day work week. And it's a very big topic in the UK. A lot of businesses here are rolling it out. I actually feel like it might be like, like actually being rolled out, like kind of as a thing. I don't know, but it's a big deal. What I'm wondering is, you obviously have a lot of investors. You've raised tons of capital. Was there anyone not for it? Was it an easy sell to get all the other people's approval for who was involved in the business? Or was it kind of like, yep, good to go?
It was more that. I actually don't really remember even a sell. I think we had so much conviction in it, and we're also very reasonable about how we wanted to set it up. And so it felt like very low risk of trying it, where I think, a lot of reasons not to try it are, well, who knows what's going to happen, and what if it doesn't work? And, people a little bit scared of change, of course. But when you know and say it out loud that, like, if this isn't working, we're not going to do it anymore, all of a sudden it feels much less scary. And you sort of realize that there's really no way to learn whether it works or not unless you actually do it. And so I think that was the case. And I think it helped too that this was something that, like, personally, Christina and I and the rest of the team were feeling. And so it made it really easy to just, like, say the team really needs this. And I think our investors for sure have always been very supportive of that perspective, where, like, we trust you, and if you think that's what you guys need, then great. We're sort of very supportive.
Sounds so cool. If anyone needs a job, go to Primary. Sounds like a great place to work.
Yes, the sporting work week has been awesome for sure.
Oh my God, love it. What do you think is important advice for entrepreneurs in 2022?
I think two things come to mind the most. One is that if you have an idea that you can't stop thinking about, it's probably a good basis for starting something. And I would say that just given how hard it is and all the ups and downs that come with it, it's almost necessary to, like, love this idea and have so much conviction about it. Because otherwise, I think if it's just like, oh, this could be cool or this could be interesting, I don't think that as, like, the basis of, like, we're going to go try this would give people enough motivation to sort of, like, stay in it through thick and thin. Because there's a lot of that. And so I think just make sure that whatever idea you want to start, that you just, like, it's almost like you have to, like, get to that level where you almost have to, and then you'll make it work.
What's that rule in dating? They say it's either a fuck yes or it's a no.
Oh my God. Well, that's perfect. Yes. I've never even heard that, but it's brilliant though. It's totally it. It has to be that, because otherwise, like, it just is a no. And it doesn't mean there's not another idea, but, like, it has to be the fuck yes. Definitely. I love that. Oh my God. That's my favorite thing. Okay. You're going to write down your, like, struggling ideas in your notebook over there. And I'm going to, like, do the fuck yes or no test. And then otherwise, once you pass that test, then, like, you just have to go. You just have to, like, put all the challenging, scary things, like, in the notebook over there. And then you just have to start, because there's never a perfect time. There's never enough money in the bank. There's, like, never enough, like, help to, like, deal with all the other shit. And so you just have to do it and know, like, I don't know, it's helpful for me too to think about the worst case scenario. Like, just play that out. If you're scared about something, literally envision, if this goes terribly, terribly, like, what does that look like? And, like, once you can see it, then it, like, feels less bad somehow. It's the unknown that tends to be the most scary. But if you can put some known to, like, if this is the worst thing that's ever happened, like, what actually happens, then I think it starts to feel less scary. So I would do that too.
Love both of those. Great. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Of course.
So at the end of every episode, we wrap up with 6 quick questions, some of which we might have covered, some of which we might not have, but I ask them all the same. So question number 1 is, what's your why? Why are you doing what you're doing?
To give kids confidence.
Oh, love that. That's a feel-good thing. Question number 2 is, what's your, like, top favorite marketing moment so far?
This is a repeat, but it is the marketing, like, headline, not all baby suits need to say little slugger. That was a big one.
Question number 3, what's your go-to business resource when you think about, like, a newsletter, a podcast, or a book?
I really love the After Hours podcast. It's actually where we first heard about the 4-day work week concept, but it's 3 Harvard Business School professors who are just sort of talking casually about topics of the day or random things that each of them has brought in. And it's really interesting. It's like smart perspective. I feel like caught up on the news, but also like I understand it without having to read like 600 newspaper articles and like have my eyes glaze over. And so I really like that one.
I haven't listened to that one. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to link it in the show notes for anyone who wants to check it out as well. It sounds great. Question number 4 is, how do you win the day? What are your AM or PM rituals and habits that keep you feeling happy and successful and motivated?
I am such an early to bed girl. Like if the lights are off at 9:30, I'm so thrilled. If I have like had some sweat during the day, exercise, anything, even for 15 minutes, I feel so much better. And so I try to get that out of the way before calls start in the morning. And then in between, I think I feel the happiest when I have made like at least one real connection with another human during the day, like whether it's family or friends or something where, I don't know, I really need that sort of one-on-one like connection time. So that's a huge one for me too.
I love that. Question number 5, what has been your worst money mistake in the business?
I think that we raised our second round too late. I wish that looking back, we had thought about, because we ended up raising a little more money early on than we needed. And I wish that we kept to the original plan, which was like get to launch and raise money then. Because once we got through launch and we talked about like, you know, inventory sold down and like the sales trajectory is not great because we don't have any inventory, it was harder to raise capital then than it would have been if we just stuck to like, okay, this initial capital was to get us to launch. We're there. We did it. It's awesome. And like, now let's go raise our next round. I think we were like, oh, but we have more money in the bank. We'll just wait. And we shouldn't have done that.
That's interesting. That's a really interesting perspective. And one of those ones that's like, you only know in hindsight.
Completely. Yes. So that's one I would have changed.
And last question number 6, what is just a crazy story that you can share from the journey of building a business? Good, bad, anything, whatever you want.
Well, this is maybe too long of a question for a speed round, but
we can make it longer.
Oh my gosh. Okay. When we started the business, we didn't get an office initially. We looked at like, you know, sort of WeWork desk spaces in the city. Christina lives in New Jersey. I live in Connecticut. And so we were both coming in. And we ended up both joining the Reebok Sports Club on the Upper West Side because they had a huge open space with Wi-Fi and amazing food. And like, as we were starting the business, we were like, and we'll just like exercise all the time and we'll get so healthy. It'll be great. And the membership was like much cheaper than renting a desk somewhere. And so we did that, which was awesome. Highly recommend. We were working there for like the first like 6 to 7 months or so. And there was one, and so all of our calls were in this like tiny phone booth. There were only 2 of them for like everyone who was working in this like communal space where the food was. And so there was always like a line for these phone booths, and it was like always stressful. Like, oh, we have like a 1:30 call, and like the phone booths are occupied. And so we did a lot of calls from the phone booths, and one of them was a pitch to an investor, and I think it was our seed round actually. And we were, you know, talking about the business and the vision for the close, and he just had such a strong view on our clothing, which wasn't his background at all, where he was like, you know what would be really awesome is if you could have like something like really just like visual that like everyone would see it and recognize like, oh, that's a primary thing. And his suggestion for real was like, what if you guys just had like everything from primary just had a huge fucking zipper on it? Like verbatim said, huge fucking zipper. Like everything would just have a huge fucking zipper. And so when kids were at the playground, all the parents would be like, oh, look at that zipper. That's a primary hoodie. Like, and so, you know, he's like, just think about that. If that's something like that maybe could be helpful. And like, and it's such an interesting example because it was so crazy and so obviously at odds with like everything else we were trying to do about the aesthetic of the brand, but also such a good representation of all these conversations where everyone has an opinion. Everyone has the like, here's what's going to solve your life. My idea is going to solve it. And so it was one of the early learnings for us where like, we didn't know that was going to be true, that everyone was going to have an opinion about like what else we should be doing and how we should be doing things differently. And so early on, I think when we had calls like that, maybe not that one, but other calls like that, it was like, oh, well, maybe we should think about doing that. And like, that that could be interesting. Maybe we should think about that. And all of a sudden our heads were spinning because like everyone had something to say. And it took us a little bit to get back to like, you know what? Like, that's okay. That can go in the notebook too. But we're like, we have a lot of conviction in our idea that is ours and specific, and it's what we're here for. And like, we're just going to keep coming back to that. It's very easy to spin on like other people's suggestions. And sometimes there's like a nugget there that's great and worth considering. But in general, I think having the conviction and like sticking to your guns on your original idea is so important. Otherwise, it's a huge like mental energy suck.
Otherwise, you end up with huge fucking zippers all over the world.
Which maybe will just be the next company if we do that. But for now, we're going to stick with primary.
I love that though, because it goes back to what I was saying earlier of like, you really need to flex that muscle of just finding the focus and sticking with like your kind of like blinders are off. You're like just in a straight line. You're just kind of keeping focused on what you're doing, like one step after the other kind of vibes. But it's hard because someone will give you an idea and you'll go off for a couple of days and explore that idea. And then you're like, oh, I need to just come back and like focus on what is my vision.
Totally. Yeah. It's so hard. And it's tempting too, because along the way, especially raising money, I think like there are plenty of people who are like, oh, that's interesting. It's just not for me. Like, I don't want to invest. And then like, you're in this place where like, oh no, is this like a terrible idea? It's like, no, it's just not for everyone. And that's just how that goes.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today and sharing all of your learnings and your lessons in building primary so far. It's been such a joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was so fun chatting. I appreciate it.